At a time when this world just seemed to be spinning and reeling out of control. There were some believers, deceivers, the few in betweeners who seemed to have no place they could go. Same old song, just right and you're wrong. Living's just something you're going through. No place to hide. I fell into your eyes and I found myself in you. Look to the stars, Lord, and roar to the bars, till my life had gone up and so. With my hands on the wheel, there's something I know is real. I know that I'm headed home. In the shade of an oak down by the river, you see an old man and a boy. They're setting sails, they're spinning tales. He's probably telling him about some whales, laughing with a lady that they enjoy. Yeah, it's the same damn tune. It's the man in the moon. It's the way that I feel since I found you. 'Cause I had no place I could hide. I looked into your eyes and I found myself in you. I looked to the stars, I busted up some bars. I saw my life as a joke, but with my hands on the wheel, something that's so real. I know that I'm headed home.
Let's go ahead and finish our discussion of workers' compensation fraud. In the last video, we focused on worker-perpetrated workers' compensation fraud, which is just a very small percentage of fraudulent insurance cases. Another type of workers' compensation fraud is where the employer is perpetrating the fraud. The employer uses fraudulent information or take other fraudulent measures to reduce workers' compensation claims or to reduce the cost of workers' compensation premiums. One fraudulent activity that employers can engage in and sometimes do engage in is misclassify employees. They classify employees at a less dangerous, less expensive classification rate. If you remember back to the unit where we talked about workers' compensation premiums, workers' compensation premiums can vary based upon the classification of the type of work being done. If the employer can classify workers at a less dangerous or in a less dangerous class, they can save hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars from their workers' compensation premiums. But that is fraudulence. And when we talk about, one thing I haven't brought up enough here in this unit, fraud is crime. We're talking about criminal acts people can go to prison for. It's not just a slap on the wrist, well, you got to pay that money back. There's the potential for people to do jail time when they engage in this type of fraudulent activity. Yeah, more specific example of what we're talking about here. An employer classifies a roofer as an equipment operator. Workers' compensation insurance for roofers is much more expensive than workers' compensation insurance for equipment operators. So they take all the roofers and classify them as equipment operators, then that can save them hundreds of thousands of dollars or more in some cases. Or they classify an equipment operator as a foreman or a superintendent. Foreman, superintendent, that's going to be less expensive than equipment operator. Another way that an employer can make money fraudulently is by saying that workers are working in one state that has a lower classification rate or a lower expense code, but they are actually working in a state that has a higher classification rating or expense code. Again, it could be hundreds of thousands of dollars difference doing something like that. If you're an Oklahoma company, Oklahoma logging company, say in southeastern Oklahoma where there is a logging industry, and you're headquartered in Oklahoma, but your workers are in Arkansas doing, maybe they're in Arkansas for 6 months doing a job over there, clearing a tract of timber in Arkansas. Well, it's a lot more expensive in Arkansas for workers' compensation than it is in Oklahoma. So to save money illegally, the employer says, well, they weren't working in Arkansas. They're not working in Arkansas. They're working in Oklahoma. Employers try these kinds of stunts occasionally. It usually bites them in the ass. It usually catches up with them. They usually are caught, and they are usually going to be penalized in one way or another. And the penalties could include jail time for the responsible parties. Oftentimes, it doesn't end up with anyone doing jail time, but that is a potential. That is the potential, because these are illegal acts. It's not just unethical, it's illegal to engage in this fraudulent activity for financial gain at the expense of another person. Another way that the employer might defraud the insurance company would be to hide payroll. They use some creative accounting procedures that would result in lower remuneration numbers. They hide payroll. Part of the cost of workers' comp premiums is based upon the size of the company's payroll. Maybe the company's payroll is $10 million a year, but somehow or another, through accounting magic, they're able to hide $2 million of that payroll. Well, that's going to be a significant savings to them. It's going to in essence, harm the insurance company, because the insurance company is paying for coverage, but they're not getting their full premium for providing that coverage. And some might argue, well, that's a victimless crime. Well, hell, there's a victim. The victim would be the other companies that are doing it right, that have to make up for what the dishonest company is not paying. Insurance companies, it's up to them to be diligent to verify information. They normally are, but there might be some fraudulent activities that escape their auditing process. And again, when employers are caught, there are consequences for that. Now, from an honesty, ethics standpoint, employers must be diligent in providing correct information. It's a legal responsibility. Now, one other type of employer-based fraud that I don't have here, this is the type of employer-based fraud that directly harms workers. This would be the employer that uses deception or some kind of manipulation, and is, in a sense, technically it's not fraud. It is illegal, it is unethical, but they refuse to provide required coverage to workers, or they refuse to cover workers' injuries. They, in some way, shape, or form, they're not providing care to the worker that the law says should be provided to the worker. Let's talk about the most expensive form of workers' compensation fraud. This is medical provider-based fraud. Costs the country millions, if not billions of dollars each year through the workers' comp system. And a lot of I say a lot, it's still a minority. It's a small percentage of medical providers. There's a percentage minority of medical providers that have learned how to game the workers' comp system and benefit fraudulently from the workers' comp system. And they're using fraudulent information to increase their revenues. There are cases where patients, the worker, and the medical provider work together to steal from the insurance company. And that's what we're talking about here, is theft. Let's not sugarcoat it. It's theft. The doctor, the chiropractor, whoever it is stealing from the insurance carrier. This can also have an impact not just on the insurance carrier, but also on the employer. If the medical provider is exaggerating the cost of the treatment that they're providing, well, that cost of treatment is going to have an effect on the employer's MRI, and or EMR, and it's going to result in higher premiums for the employer. And the really large-scale cases of medical provider-based workers' comp fraud are cases where there are multiple conspirators working to defraud the workers' compensation system. And that's what we have here in this case. And I'm going to show just a brief portion of a video clip discussing this case. This was a case from California a few years back. Several conspirators included doctors, pharmacists, and other parties. They conspired together and they stole almost $40 million from the workers' compensation system. $40 million from the workers' compensation system. This is the kind of scale that we can be talking about with medical provider-based fraud. Okay, let me go ahead and stop here and bring the video of this incident over. In this video, we have a district attorney that is talking about the charges that have been filed against all of the conspirators in this case. The video goes on almost 20 minutes. We're only going to watch the first 4 or 5 minutes of it, just so you can learn a little bit more about the types of schemes that were involved with this case of workers' compensation fraud. Remember, these are medical providers, pharmacists, doctors that are the perpetrators of this theft.
The Orange County District Attorney's Office has charged 21 doctors, 1 physician assistant, 2 pharmacists, and 2 business owners with multiple felonies for their participation in a medical insurance fraud scheme. Some of them will be making their first court appearance today. The Kings and their co-defendants have been charged with felony counts of insurance fraud, conspiracy to commit medical insurance fraud, false and fraudulent claims, rebates for patient referrals, and referral of clients for compensation. What are the defendants facing? Tanya King could be sentenced up to 117 years in prison. The 2 pharmacists could serve up to 28 years, while the sentencing imposed on each of the physicians could be up to 25 years in prison. Fraud, as you know, drives up the cost of medical care, and it affects our ability to, and it affects the ability to conduct business in California. And so, we really do need to stay on top of it and get after it to the extent that we can. Tanya Moreland King and Christopher King are accused of being the masterminds behind this scam between 2011 and 2015. Three complex scams resulted in billing 27 insurance carriers in excess of $40 million and collecting more than $23 million. And the sales of unnecessary compound creams, repackaged oral pain medications, and urine toxicology tests. So the first scam is referred to as the snake oil scam. The Kings are accused of working with pharmacists and co-defendant Charles Bonner, owner of Stevens Pharmacy in Costa Mesa, to manufacture a variety of creams that didn't cure anything and that had not been approved by the FDA. The Kings are accused of purchasing the creams for between $15 and $40 per tube, which, by the way, I thought was a pretty high price right there, and billing to the patient's workers' compensation carriers between $250 and $700 per tube. Tanya King is accused of recruiting physicians to participate in the scam through the use of a flat $50 rate to the physician or share in the profits. The second thing is the medication kickback scam, and in that situation, the Kings are accused of purchasing repackaged oral pain medications from two different companies: New Care Pharmaceuticals in Orange and AS Medication Solutions in Costa Mesa. Using their company, Monarch Medical Group, Using their company, Monarch Medical Group, as a cover, the Kings are accused of repackaging the medication sent directly to the physicians involved in the scam. As the doctors dispensed the medication, the barcode on the packaging was scanned, notifying the Kings. In turn, they're accused of billing workers' compensation insurance carriers without disclosing the wholesale cost or the fact that they purchased the medication on behalf of the physicians who ultimately prescribed it. Once the Kings received the payment, they're accused of splitting the profits with the prescribing physician based upon a prearranged agreement. The number 3 scam is bogus urine tests. The Kings are accused of providing technical staff to participating physicians' offices through their company, One Source Labs. The doctors are accused of ordering unnecessary urine tests under the guise of verifying patients on workers' compensation insurance who were taking their medications as prescribed. Correction. The doctors are accused of ordering unnecessary urine tests under the guise of verifying that the patients were taking their medications as they were supposed to. The tests were only given to patients who suffered injuries at work and not individuals who actually may have needed any urine testing.
You get the gist of that, and you can always go on YouTube and watch the rest of that if you wanted to. And that's kind of an extreme case, but these types of crimes are ongoing right now. They occur every day somewhere in the United States, maybe not on that scale, but medical provider-based fraud in general is a big-time crime. But then we also have medical provider-based fraud that is purposefully focused on taking advantage of the workers' compensation system. And this by far is the greatest source of workers' compensation fraud. And I left off, they mentioned that the bogus urine tests, they weren't given to all the patients. They were only given to patients who were on workers' comp. They were giving those bogus urine tests to patients who are on workers' comp because they knew the workers' comp system would pay for it, and there would be very little oversight. There would be very little question. Then you have the tubes of the bogus medication, the creams, that were being workers' comp was being billed up to $700 for a tube of cream that was snake oil that didn't have any medical or medicinal value at all. $40 million was billed against the workers' comp insurance, 27 different workers' comp insurance providers. They received $23 million in payments from that $40 million in billing. Now, again, I'm not worried about Joe Blow that pretends to sprain his ankle and maybe, I'm not worried as much about Joe Blow that pretends to sprain his ankle and maybe steals $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. This is the real concern when it comes to insurance fraud and workers' compensation insurance fraud in particular. It needs to be. We need to realize that it goes on. We need to. And now, one thing I should mention as safety managers, we may not really be in a position to do anything about this, but we can be aware of this possibility. We can be aware of some of the scams that medical doctors and others may try to perpetrate in an effort to increase their revenues, because that's what it all comes down to. They're trying to increase their revenue at very little cost to them. They're taking advantage of the system to do that. And when they steal from the system, it costs everybody else. Other people have to make up for what they're stealing from the system, out of the system. And I'm going to get off my soapbox a little bit. Let's talk specifically about some of the more common scams involving medical provider fraud. Upcoding is a particular type of strategy used by medical providers to increase their revenues fraudulently. They perform a medical procedure, but they charge not for the procedure that they performed, but they upcode it and charge for a more expensive procedure that was not performed. Also, medical providers will perform unnecessary procedures that aren't going to help the injured worker, but they perform the procedures because they know workers' comp's going to pay for it. And there's a wide variety of different treatments and procedures that a medical provider might be able to bill for or perform that doesn't do the worker any good. We see the same thing with health insurance fraud in general, not just workers' comp. But we're focused here on workers' compensation insurance fraud. And in some cases, and this is where it gets even more extreme, they bill for a service that was never provided. They bill for something that they never did. They didn't do anything, but they say they did it, and they send a bill to the workers' compensation insurance provider expecting to be paid for something they didn't do. And if that's not flat out theft, I don't know what is. They can also, along with this, sometimes all of these sometimes goes with exaggerating the injury severity. They will, and sometimes this is conspiring with the injured worker or the worker who claims to be injured. They'll exaggerate the severity of the injury. The doctor benefits because they can do more expensive medical treatments. The worker benefits, maybe they can stay on workers' comp longer and continue to receive indemnity benefits, or maybe be better positioned to receive a settlement from their injury case. But again, you could probably do a whole class on this, and I'm really not qualified to do a whole class on it. But I do find it interesting. I think it's important for us to realize when it comes to workers' comp fraud that it's not your average employee out there faking an injury that's the major problem. It's these guys, or these men, these women, these conspirators that are working together to steal millions of dollars. And we all end up paying for it. Another type of fraud that we haven't talked about, or I haven't mentioned it wasn't on that original slide. We've talked about employer-based fraud, we've talked about medical provider-based fraud, and we've talked about worker-based fraud. There can also be fraud involving the insurance carrier. This kind of fraud perpetrated by the insurance carrier may involve the insurance company denying to pay claims that it is legally obligated to provide. The company does not meet its obligation to provide benefits in response to legitimate workers' compensation claims. Now, this is difficult to prove criminally. It's difficult to prove any kind of conspiracy, but insurance companies can save money by denying claims. Again, it's not necessarily criminal. Sometimes it might be more of a case of incompetence than criminal behavior on the part of the insurance carrier, and a little bit of greed thrown in there. There can be greed that doesn't manifest itself as a criminal act, but there are cases that could be charged as criminal acts. Again, we're talking about stuff that insurance companies can do that could be charged as a criminal act. Insurance company has an obligation to their clients to provide the service they say they're going to provide. If they don't provide that service, if they intentionally use deception to not provide that service, then that would be fraud. All right, that brings us to the end of this semester. There is one more thing I want to share with you, and this could be a test question, even though it's not specifically workers' compensation. Some of you probably sometimes think I'm a little bit too serious about this. It's all this safety management stuff. Now, that's okay. You're welcome to think that. But this case here that happened in Catoosa in 2021 is why I'm serious about safety management, why you should be serious about safety management if you are going into this field. This was an accident it occurred in 2021 at Catoosa, one of the industries over in around the port of Catoosa. Can't get my words out all of a sudden. The name of the company was Valmont Industries. Let me go ahead and show you a video clip that will provide you with more information about this particular incident, and then I'll talk a little bit more about it. I'm not gonna turn this into a dissertation, but we will talk a little bit more about it after we see this clip.
To this week, and now his parents are looking back on his life.
News on 6's Grant Stevens has that story.
In an industrial accident in Catoosa this week, and now his parents are looking back on his life.
News on 6's Grant Stevens has that story for us tonight. Grant?
Lori Craig, Zeke Hearn's parents say their son made a lasting impact on every single person he met. He was the kind of guy who wouldn't hesitate to help anyone who needed it.
There was never a time in which someone needed help and Zeke wasn't there to help them.
Zeke Hearn was a lot of things to a lot of people. Dozens of comments under the hashtag #PinkForZeke paint the picture of a helper and a leader, someone who was loved.
Helping people, that was a huge thing for him, was helping those that were in need.
Others mourn the loss of a vital member of their church.
He had a really good heart.
He had an infectious smile.
That is for sure.
And if you weren't laughing, he would make you laugh.
Zeke died on Wednesday after an accident at the Valmont galvanizing plant where he worked. His parents, Kelly and James Hearn, say he was crushed by a 600 to 800 pound sheet of metal. They say it hit him in the back from behind and fell on top of him.
We are unsure of how long he was lying there, if he was alone, if he was still conscious, or anything like that.
Zeke was rushed to the hospital, where he died after doctors tried to revive him.
I know that the doctors and all the nurses did everything that they could. There was nothing else that they could do.
Zeke's parents haven't been told much else about what happened Wednesday, and they likely won't have answers until OSHA is finished with its investigation in 3 to 6 months.
I want to know what happened to our son.
I reached out to Valmont for a statement. They say, quote, "Our thoughts and prayers are with this employee's family."
Yeah, that worker, 19 years old, that could have been one of you guys. It could have been, any worker in just about any industry in Oklahoma. That's why. Hopefully that's why you chose this major. That's hopefully why you're wanting to go into this profession. It's a great career path. We can earn a good living. We can retire early. We can make enough money to retire early. But hopefully we all have the passion to prevent incidents like this. This is, and I hope, and again, if few of you do think I take this too seriously, I'll wear that as a badge of honor, because that's just my passion for what I do, what I've done the last 20 years. And there's nothing worse than going to a coworker's funeral. Serious business, what we're about here. I hope you take every opportunity to learn as much as you can, prepare yourself as well as you can for the profession that you're heading toward if you're in this major. All of you have the potential to be effective safety professionals. Some of you are not putting in the effort, and again, it's great to have fun. Hell, I had all kinds of fun when I was in college, and I didn't take my classes all the time as seriously as I should have. But the information that's being covered in your classes, the different projects that you're completing in these classes, they're intended to help prepare you for this career. The presentations I have you do, those are the types of presentations that you're going to be doing as a safety professional. You're going to be using the information that you're exposed to in these classes, synthesizing that information, using your critical thinking skills to solve problems in the workplace that would prevent accidents like the accident that took the life of this 19-year-old. That's what safety management's about, and I hope you guys appreciate that. The gravity of this profession. What we do is on par with what police officers and firefighters do as far as providing a level of protection. Again, we're not providing a level of protection to the entire public. We're providing a level of protection to workers, helping workers go home safely each evening. All right, I've preached enough. I'm going to go ahead and end it here. I have enjoyed working with you this semester. Have a good summer. Let me know if you have any questions. If any of you are still looking for an internship, let me know, or I'll let you know. Pay attention to the emails that I send out. There might still be some companies at the last minute looking for a summer intern. So, all right, well, have a good summer, and I hope to see you back in the fall.